If you're struggling to shift that stubborn belly fat which sits at the bottom of your belly, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can drop body fat and how you can increase fat oxidation by eating the same number of calories, but instead looking at nutrient partitioning, the number of carbohydrates, protein and fat that you are consuming every single day, because they all play specific roles within the human body, but you might be consuming too many carbohydrate or too little fat, which is impacting your overall progress and actually leading to a plateau in the amount of body fat that you are dropping. So understand that we have different types of stored body fat: subcutaneous and visceral. Subcutaneous fat is fat that we can see. If you take two fingers, you pinch on your stomach, you pull away that skin, there's a little bit of fat, and a little bit of fat pretty good for us. We're biological machines. We need to regulate our body temperature, whether it's hot or whether it's absolutely freezing right now. But too much fat, detrimental to our health, and that's why we see a close association between obesity, high BMI, and also type 2 diabetes mellitus. And we'll lead on to that when we talk about insulin. We then have visceral fat. So that's fat which surrounds our organs. It's naked to the human eye, but once again, if you have too much fat surrounding the heart, well, that's going to lead to cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, angina. So our goal is actually to break down that stored body fat. How do we do that? We do it through a process called lipolysis, where we break down that stored body fat and we convert it into something called a free fatty acid, also abbreviated to FFA. Now, those free fatty acids are also broken down in the body via lipolysis when we consume dietary fat, things like salmon, nuts, seeds, oils, fatty meats, cream, cheese. They are also converted into free fatty acids. And what happens is the mitochondria, that's an organelle inside of our cells, so hundreds of thousands of years ago, via a process called endosymbiosis. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Venom, but it's very, very similar to that in terms of Spider-Man, where Venom and the individual, they are symbiotes, so they pretty much fuse together, their DNA, and they become one. And that's exactly what happened in the human body. The mitochondria is essentially a symbiote, and we went under endosymbiosis, so the mitochondria is what's responsible for fat oxidation, breaking down fat and converting it into a fuel, also known as adenosine triphosphate. Now this is where it gets interesting, because we have a hormone called insulin. And insulin is produced by the pancreas, and it's responsible for regulating your blood sugar levels. So if you've got a high accumulation of glucose dancing around in the blood, insulin regulates it and it takes it from the blood into your cells. However, if we have an increase in insulin or an elevated increase in insulin over a long period of time, well, that's going to decrease fat oxidation. It's also going to decrease lipolysis. So how can we actually increase insulin sensitivity, but also the opportunity to increase fat oxidation and the breakdown of stored body fat? Well, we can focus on zone 2 cardio. 130 to 150 BPM is what you should be aiming for in terms of a heart rate threshold. And what that will do is it will increase mitochondrial volume. So that increasing the number of mitochondria that we have, therefore, that will increase fat oxidation, the amount of body fat which is broken down. Thus, that will also increase insulin sensitivity. So if we produce little insulin, but it's highly sensitive and it can drive the uptake of glucose from the blood into your cell, compared to elevated levels of insulin which aren't operating at 100% capacity, well, that's also going to increase fat oxidation. So when we actually look at those macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein and fat, carbohydrates do have the biggest impact on our overall insulin levels. So I highly recommend that around your training window, your pre-workout, your intra-workout, and also your post-workout meals, that is where you are prioritizing your carbohydrate intake to replenish liver, and muscle glycogen. So throughout the day, your body can then tap into those fat stores, subcutaneous or visceral fat, break it down via lipolysis into those free fatty acids and increase fat oxidation, which the mitochondria is responsible for. But if you're having carbohydrates throughout your day, you're going to have repeated insulin spikes. And of course, we now understand that if insulin increases, fat oxidation decreases and lipolysis decreases, because glucose can't just disappear from the blood like a magic trick. Abracadabra, you wave your wand, it disappears. It doesn't work like that. It has to go somewhere. So of course, we can store it in the liver and in the muscle as glycogen. But if we have excess, that's when it's stored as that subcutaneous or visceral fat. So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle. So our goal there is to prioritize carbohydrate intake around our training windows, and then throughout the day you're going to be in a lipolytic state where your body can actually break down that stored fat and convert it into free fatty acids, which the body can use as a fuel, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, protein also can increase the impact on insulin. It spikes insulin. It's similar to carbohydrate, but that's if you have little to no carbs. So once again, we want to aim for pro-fat meals across the day. Things like eggs and avocado in the morning. And then when we get to our training window, our pre-workout, our intra-workout, and our post-workout meals, that is where we're going to be prioritizing carbohydrate and protein with very little fat. And we can actually see fat has the least impact on insulin, or how much insulin is produced to regulate your blood sugar levels. So overall, am I saying you need to remove all of the food and drink that you enjoy, or to completely cut out carbohydrates, protein, or fat? Absolutely not. You can actually reduce your overall insulin levels by having a balanced meal. So when you have carbohydrates on its own, it spikes insulin significantly. If you were to then have protein, that spike isn't as great. If we then have fat on top of that, the spike starts to reduce moderately. And that's because protein can help to slow down digestion. It has a high thermogenic effect, therefore it takes a lot of energy to digest it, process it, and metabolize it. Much like fats, however, carbohydrates, they are very easily digested. Therefore, we're going to have that big spike in your overall blood glucose levels. So that's why it's incredibly important to look at nutrient partitioning. If you've been eating the same number of calories and you've lost 5 to 10 kilos of body fat, but now you've sort of reached a plateau, consider looking at nutrient partitioning, perhaps putting more calories towards fats and also protein, but also manipulating the number of calories and those macronutrients within your meals across the day. So you then might have a pro-fat meal in the morning, a pro-fat meal at lunch, and if you're training in the evening, that's when you're going to prioritize your carbohydrates pre, intra, and post-workout, just to reduce the effect that insulin has, the spike on your overall blood sugar levels. Now, what you can do to increase insulin sensitivity and drive glucose from the blood into your cell is movement. All movement matters and every minute counts. And when you actually contract your muscle, or when you go for a walk to the supermarket, or perhaps you're walking the dog, or you're catching up with friends, family, or partner, you can actually increase your glucose transportation from the blood into your cell 7 to 20 times more compared to resting conditions without insulin. Therefore, when you do consume carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, more so carbohydrates, insulin is a lot more sensitive. Therefore, we're not going to produce as much because it's great at its job. We don't need as much to regulate your blood sugar levels when you do consume those macronutrients. So overall, by eating the same number of calories and focusing on nutrient partitioning, you can actually increase your chances of fat oxidation, breaking down that stored body fat via a process called lipolysis. It puts you in a lipolytic state by focusing on pro-fat meals and then carbohydrates around your training window. Therefore, those free fatty acids are broken down by the mitochondria through fat oxidation, and it produces a fuel known as ATP. adenosine triphosphate. If you enjoyed this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 10,000 followers over on Instagram, so you can go and find me there where I post daily about fat loss, muscle building, how to improve your health, your hormones, and your habits. Follow at JapFitCoach, and for every follower that I get from this video, I will send you over a free fat loss guide on how you can increase fat oxidation by eating the same number of calories through nutrient partitioning. I shall see you in the next video.